Hi, this is Editor Troxel. In today's tutorial, we had an interesting request on the YouTube channel where a person says there are some effects that will allow a parameter to be outside the listed range. Why they allow that, I'm not sure, but I'll show you a couple of examples. And the question was, can I find all of the parameters in my project that are outside of range, because there are some instances where it will snap back to the greatest value or the least value depending on which side of the range you would be on. And the question turns out that answer is yes, we can determine whether or not the parameter is outside of range. So let's see how we would do that. Here I have just a single clip on the timeline, and so for my video event I have two effects on it. First of all, I have the Unsharp Mask effect, and this first value here I have set at 7. Well, if we scroll this back and forth, you will see that the minimum value is 0, the maximum value is 1, but it will allow you to put in a 7 and it will accept that 7. Same thing over here with our black bar fill. In this particular case, I added some keyframes. So I have the scale keyframed, and if we look at the keyframes, this keyframe right here, I have it set to 15. This keyframe, it comes back into the range at the maximum of 10, and 10 is the maximum, by the way. And on this one, I have it set to 12. So we have two keyframes that are out of range. And so we will test it with these two effects and see if we can get them to show up. So here's our script. We start with all our normal usings in our public class, MyVegas, and then we set our main routine here, and we set our MyVegas equals Vegas. Then I created me a string, which I just set to nothing. Then for each track, my track in myvegas.project.tracks, if this is a video track, if my track.is video, then I want to go through each event on it. For each track event in my track.events, what I'm doing is here I'm saying, okay, I'm looking at track number whatever event that starts at this location, and then this /r/n will actually put a carriage return in the string, so it will start a new line when I actually display this string. Then I'm going to change that event to a video event, which I just called v-event, and then for each effect, which I called effect, in v-event.effects, I went ahead and added that effect name, and I get that from the effect.plugin.name. That way we know which effect we're looking at. Then, if the effect.plugin is an OFX plugin, then I get the OFX effect called OFX from effect.OFX effect. And then for each parameter, the OFX parameter, which I just called the OFX parm, in OFX.parameters, I want to check to see if any of those values are out of range. So I created me a string, which I just called rs for return string, equals check value OFX and OFX parm. So I need to pass it the OFX effect and the parameter that we're looking at. Now, if the string that I got back was nothing, then there wasn't anything to add. If it was not nothing, then I'm going to add that to S and add a carriage return at the end of it. And then between each of the events, I'm going to add a carriage return as well. Then finally, when I'm done, I'm going to copy that information to the clipboard. That way, if you wanted to paste it somewhere, you could do that. And then I'm going to display it, because potentially it could be a long list. In this particular case, it's going to be a very short list, because we have one event with two effects. So now the question becomes, how do we check each one of those, and that's where our check value routine comes in. Unfortunately, every different parameter type requires its own code, just like we've seen before. So let's take a look at check value. So here's our check value routine. It's a public and it's a string because we're going to be returning a string. We're passing it the OFX effect, which is just called OFX, and the OFX parameter, which is just called OFX parm. Then I'm setting a string to nothing. That way, if we don't find anything, it's going to return the nothing, and therefore it won't get added. Then switch OFX parm.parameter type.toString. We're going to look at each parameter type individually. If you remember, we have lots of parameter types. We have the RGB, the RGBA, the Boolean, the double 2D, which we can see here on the screen, integer, string, custom, all kinds of different types. It turns out we really only need to look at the numeric ones. So that would be like double 2D, double 3D, integer 2D, integer 3D, and string we don't need to look at. Boolean we don't need to look at. How can a Boolean be out of range? It's either true or it's false. How can a string be out of range? We really only need to look at our numeric ones, so let's start with case double. We get an OFX double parameter, and we just set that to P2 as of type OFX double parameter from OFX and the parameter name. Then I look to see, do we have any keyframes? If we do not have any keyframes, then we're just going to check, is our P2.value equal to P2.displayMax? If we look in our parameters for P2, we see that we have a displayMax, and it's the same type, double, and a displayMin, which is the same type, double, that we can compare these two. So if the value is greater than the displayMax, or the value is less than the display minimum, then I know it's out of range. So I set me a string here and said, this added a carriage return, and then said value out of range, and the value that it's showing is this value right here. And then I went ahead and showed the minimum value and the maximum value so that you'd be able to compare, okay, is it below, is it above, and what is its value compared to what the maximum value is. Now, if we do have keyframes, if you notice in my example project, we have one without keyframes and one with keyframes. If we do have keyframes, then we have to go for each, and it's an OFX double keyframe in this particular case. It said K1 equals P2.keyframes. Now here we have to check if our K1.value is greater than our P2.displayMax, or our K1.value is less than our P2.displayMinimum. Then we're going to add a line in here that says, okay, our keyframe at this time has this value, and here's the minimum value, and here's the maximum value. If we scroll on down, now we have our double 2D. Now everything here is exactly the same as we saw above, almost. And here's the almost part. Here we have to check, is our P2.value.x greater than P2.displayMax.x? So we've got to check both our x and our y values. Is our P2.value.max less than our P2.displayMinimum.x? So our display max also has the x and y. And then, or our P2.value.y is greater than P2.displayMax.y, or our P2.value.y is less than P2.displayMinimum.y. If any of those are true, then we have a value out of range, and I went ahead and displayed our x, comma, y, and then our minimum value, so our P2.x, comma, y, and our maximum values, max.x and max.y. So that way you can compare both x and y to see which value is out of range. And then if it does have keyframes, then we have to do the same thing we did up above, but now we have to check our k1.value.x to our p2.displaymax.x and p2.displaymin.x, and our k1 value.y to our p2.displaymax.y and our p2.displaymin.y. If any of those are out of range, then we would go ahead and display the same thing again, displaying the k1 values for x and y, then the p2 display min x and min y, and then our p2 max x and max y. And then we get to our 3D. Once again, it's exactly the same, but now we're adding or p2.value.z is greater than p2.displaymax.z, or p2.value.z is less than p2.displaymin.z. So we've added our z's now. And then here we're displaying the x, y, and z. And then for our minimum values, x, y, and z, and our maximum values, x, y, and z. And then the same thing when we're checking for our keyframes. Now we check for k1.value.x, y, and z against our display max x, y, and z, and our display min x, y, and z. Oops, that should be a z. Sorry, I did not get those changed in my testing. Anyway, we would then display the k1 x, y, and z, and can also display the minimum x, y, and z and maximum x, y, and z. Next we come down to our integers. Once again, this is exactly the same that we did above. Our p2.value is greater than p2.displaymax, or our p2.value is less than p2.displaymin. Then we would display out of range and display the single ones. This is if we have keyframes. For our integer 2D, do our x and our y in both cases, and display the values plus our x and our y's. And same thing with our keyframes. Integer 3D, we're doing the exact same thing. Once again, I did not get these z's changed here, so we will change that right quick. And you can see that we're doing the exact same thing that we did with the doubles. And then if it's anything else, we just break out. So we're only looking at the numeric ones. And then if you want to see the bottom of the code, here's the entry point. So now let's run it. Okay, so here we have a track. On track 1, we have an event at 0000, which is the one event we have on the timeline. We have an effect on it named Unsharp Mask, and there is a value out of range. The value is 7. The minimum value is 0. The maximum value is 1. So we can see our value is 7. Our max value is 1. So we are over the max value. Then we have a black bar fill. Here we have a keyframe at the roughly 11-second mark, and its value is 15. The max value is 10. We have another keyframe at roughly the 20-second mark. Its value is 12. The minimum value is 1. Maximum value is 10. So we know that those two values are over the maximum value. So you can see this will show us an effect that has a parameter that is over or under the allowed range, the display range. And that will let us determine whether or not we need to be careful, because those could accidentally snap back to the display value. And so you could also go in and add which parameter name it actually was as well in the list. And I may do that for the uploaded version. I will upload this one so you can just download it and use it. And you can modify this one all you need to display the information the way you need it displayed. But let me tell you what you tell me what you think of this one, and let me know what you would like to see in the future, and like, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next tutorial.